Alrighty, here's another video. There were numerous videos I could have done, but I think they all would have sounded like shit, so I didn't bother. I do have somewhat of a quality control. A little bit. Anyway, I feel like I've made this video before, but screw it, let's go ahead and do it some more. Because I saw Keith Woods make a video, which I think was very apt. Basically talking about, it's the end of the world as we know it. Of course, the famous song by R.E.M. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Right. Anyway, don't worry, I won't do that again. But I think he made a lot of sobering points. Basically saying is that we see the financialist sort of attitude of let's make the world into, let's create a, this internationalism. You can go ahead and see it as you want, but this globalist or globalized world. And basically now we see that this is a big mistake because of COVID, because of the issues with the Ukraine and Russia war. And he's talking a little bit about multipolar world, this and that. Basically, he was saying who's going to step in. He's talking about things like, being a national, national capitalist sort of society, this and that, and that the captains of industry, if you will, he didn't say that, but those are my terms, are going to step in. World Economic Forum, this and that they're going to be the ones that step in and create this society, and people are going to be left behind. And I think that, he said something that I think everyone can agree with, is that something needs to change with this system, and that it needs to be replaced with something. But I want to expand on that a little bit and say, I think this is very sobering ideas. And he said in that as well, is it basically the whole edgy sort of idea of civil war or national divorce or whatever pussy term you want to use is not going to come anytime soon. And it's true. And it's true, it's not. Say what you will about Chaz, say what you will about whatever groups are out there. A lot of it is tough talk. And a lot of it is just another fight. Like, as I've joked throughout these videos, it's Portland fight video number 3052, where, Proud Boys, of course, Proud Boys are now completely washed up. Enrique Tarrio, although he was apparently an agent, he was an infiltrator, he was a snitch, he's going to jail. So I think Proud Boys, of course, that name is going to kind of dissipate a bit more, because I think Gavin McInnes already distanced himself from it, already saw the bullshit coming, and he's like, I'm going to step out of this. But regardless, I think he's a pussy, generally speaking, and, somebody who's tried to play optics game just as much as anybody else. But beyond that, the realization that a civil war isn't going to happen. And I think it happens with anybody who talks about politics in an edgy way, such as yours truly, and even people like Vosh. Vosh, of course, is in that sort of, we're going to have a civil war, bro, sort of shit. Now, some of this, of course, is just like virtue signaling, just LARP, something to energize his base. I saw plenty of folks who are like, yeah, we're going to fight the fascists and the right-wingers. The reality is this. Even giving in and saying, the civil war is going to happen, is that gangs are going to take over vast areas, not some right-wing militia. You give the right wing too much credit, I mean, I think that the, whatever drug cartel in Mexico has far more influence, I think, than any sort of right-wing group in Mexico does, But that's a whole other issue. At the end of the day, the gangs, whether it's Associated Crip or Blood or Texas Boys or whatever you want to say. I think it was called Texas Boys. I think it was a gang. Anyway, they have far more influence in any sort of political organization today, which is why a lot of MLs, at least recently, but I think somewhat have backed off of the idea of we need to support the lumpen proletariat because we're gonna turn them into lefties, bro. And ignoring what Marx said about lumpen proletariat, etc., etc. But anyway, it's important to sober up. It really is. People like Vosh, of course, have done the same thing that I did, where it's like, well, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I don't know if it ever will, but we're going to be prepared for it. And I played this game too. It was just living out a fantasy. It was living out a fantasy of thinking that you're going to be, the head nigga in charge, and you're going to go around shooting folks and everything else, but you're going to be the leader and all this sort of thing. It's just, it's all just pitiful delusions to keep you seeming that you're going to be the hero. In reality, no, you're probably going to end up dead on the ground. And I said shit like that too. But anyway, beyond that, it's important to sober up and see the system for what it is, and to realize that the system will adapt. And you can go ahead and say, oh, it's bad right now. It's going to get worse. And I know I've said that before. I know a lot of people have. What does that mean? Well, we've seen, folks talk about gas prices, but it will be a continued fall in living standards. You're going to see a continued sort of low end or low intensity civil war where riots will break out. We've seen, of course, Philadelphia. There have been riots and people jumping on cars and shit. And these school shootings are going to increase. These, hospital shootings and everything else, these are going to increase all the time. The U.S. will basically become like another form of Brazil. But to say it's going to be an all-out civil war is LARP. It is. It's LARP. And it's the sort of, if you're like a real full-on tanky, like, yeah, the Bolshevik revolution's right around the corner, boys. It's coming. Or my National Socialist Revolution is coming, boys. We're going to clear out the streets of the Communist Party. We're going to clear them out. It's all LARP at the end of the day. As I've said with the United States versus other countries, is that, Americans love to run their mouth. Americans love to run their mouth and act like they're going to do something. You go ahead and say America's the most propagandized country, and it is. And it is. You can go ahead and say that we're retarded. Absolutely. I'm not going to disagree. What I will say is the system that we have in place is very robust. That doesn't mean I support it. I'm saying that it's robust. We saw how quickly the West, quote unquote, came together to support Ukraine and give money and weapons to it. Now, of course, we've seen is that a lot of folks are saying basically is that, we're going to just leave Ukraine to fend for itself. And I think that is increasing. The massive amounts of surrenderings, the countless numbers of videos of foreign volunteers are being shown. The underground stuff in Azovstal and, within Mariupol itself, it's coming out. And they realize that regardless of their cope, the fact is that the Ukrainians do not have the strength to push the Russians out. And so eventually, even Kissinger, of course, has said, maybe, Mr. President, maybe we should cut a deal. I can't really do a good, Mr. President. Here we go. Mr. President, we should cut a deal with the Russians. They have beaten us. I don't know. That was my impression of Kissinger. But that's where we are. This system will simply be replaced by another. I think about it like this. Base housing used to be maintained by the military. Nowadays, it's taken over by a British firm called Balfour Beatty. And generally speaking, Balfour Beatty just keeps these houses going with chewing gum and glue. That's really what it is. I remember wanting one of these houses. And for those that have been in HVAC, you'll be like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on? But I believe, if I was looking right, it was a Goodman. And of course, HVAC guys know how great and, fancy Goodman units are. But what they did was, is that they got plastic hose like you would get for a fish tank, and they ran that up for your suction for the rest of it because they had like, I think, the normal like 3/8 inch your suction, that because you have to get your gas into the evaporator somehow. But they got the rest of it, I don't know how far, with fishing, with this sort of fish tank, plastic tubing. Absolutely ridiculous. And that's what's going to happen with the United States, is that simply things will be privatized and they will be worse than they were before. Like I say, I mean, this is the whole sort of Ancapistan doesn't really work, because it's like once you privatize something, it's just going to continue to get worse. It's kind of like almost the mirror image of like socialism, right? Or what people portray it as. Is it, oh well, socialism, people are lazy and they have enough of their needs met, so they don't do any work. You can say the same thing for those sorts of jobs, is that they do just enough to keep things going if they have their retirement money or whatever. Why do they need to do any more work? Maybe I'm ranting at this point, just kind of rambling. But I would just say this, is that it's important to sober up when you get older, folks. It's important to sober up and realize, yeah, ultimately this system doesn't care about you, like I say. But realize that the image of like a civil war, a la something like the Bolshevik Revolution, or something even like the first American Civil War, those times are gone. The world is a much more complicated place. Things are far more interconnected. You can't really do things the same way that those guys did for various reasons. And if you need an example, look at Syria, look at the war in Ukraine. You see something that, you see countless numbers of Russian tanks destroyed, la-di-da. But you also see masses of Ukrainian troops who aren't that well trained surrendering. And the videos are going up and they're saying, yeah, our officers abandoned us, or whatever the case may be. So I don't really know what else to say other than just realize is that the need for the call for an all-out civil war is not going to bring many people. There aren't masses of youth who want to join some militia or join some, I don't know, some sort of Bolshevik group that's going to say, fight fascism, this and that. And more of that is just, the whole sort of fight racism sort of stuff is basically just like, can I become another researcher, a researcher of far-right hate, so I can get a cushy government job? That's really what it is, at least in my opinion. The system is robust, but it's not infallible. And it's just going to take a few more attempts at finding whether or not, basically, I'll just say it this way, is who's going to fill the vacuum. That's really all it is. Who's going to fill the vacuum? Much is the same way as Keith Wood said. Who is going to fill the vacuum when the federal government and the local governments capitulate? Because I think they will eventually. What will they be replaced by? Will it be like OCP, like, I don't know, some sort of RoboCop thing? Or who knows? Plenty of options are out there. Anyway, I think that's all I really have to say. I just hope that folks sober up and realize that these things aren't necessarily around the corner, but I think that the slide down is definitely going to give you some burns. It's definitely going to give you some burns. So have ointment. Read between the lines on what you will on that. Anyway, that's all I got. See you later. Goodbye.